Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the broadcast. This is Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. My name is Dr. Brad Reedy. I'm the clinical director, one of the partners at Evoke. So tonight's broadcast is a little bit different. We try to have these about once a month or so, and these are broadcasts where I will take any live questions that you have. This is something that's open live to family members, friends, siblings of participants. So they can ask questions directly, or you can ask questions for and on behalf of them or about them. So that's kind of the range of topics. Really, any question related to wilderness therapy is on the board for me. It's on the table for me to answer, and I'll do my best at answering them. We start off with any questions that were pre-submitted, and then from there, I'll take any live questions. You can you can enter any live questions in our broadcast at any point. Alex, who's moderating for me, will offer those questions when we get to that point in the broadcast. So let me get to the first pre-submitted questions. The first question is, what is the program success rate getting young persons off drugs, smoking weed, and off alcohol, and what is their relapse rate? The best indicators or the best measures of success you can find on our results page, which show the results broadly. We don't specify them down into one specific symptom, but we talk about overall therapeutic improvement from a clinical level, meaning requiring clinical intervention, to a community level, which means that doesn't require a community level. I'll tell you this, that our research is second to none in the wilderness therapy industry. My partner, Dr. Matt Hoy, was one of the ones who helped develop the outcome questionnaire that is used by all wilderness therapy programs and many therapeutic programs to measure progress in therapy, the YOQ and OQ. And so those are something we've been studying now for 10 years, and we've published in many journals. And so I can tell you that our success rates are above and beyond the industry average by 30%, and that you can find details with the specific measures there. And a lot of those publications are in publications, APA accredited journals, which means they have a high level that they have to pass in terms of scrutiny to be considered valid research. Having said all of that, what I will tell you is our outcomes, both quantitatively, which means the research that we've done, but also anecdotally, is that we have a wonderful impact on children. That there's very few interventions that are as effective at addressing mental health and addiction issues. And in many ways, it's only as good as its aftercare. Right? The kind of services that are provided afterwards make a dramatic difference as we study outcomes in research. And so I don't have the measures, and they wouldn't make much sense to you off the top of my head anyway, but you can look at our research page. It was said at one point that our research page was the page to go to when looking at wilderness therapy, because we have both our studies but also the studies that are done more broadly in wilderness therapy. So by and large, the clients have a really good outcome at the end of our program. There's some dip after our program, and 2 years post-treatment, there's a slight increase from where they ended our program. So we're seeing outcomes that have legs that last over a period of time. That's the best way that I can answer that question, is just to go to the research itself and to study the measures and then to look at what's done there. Next question. Both of my children went to wilderness through the program way back when it was second nature. My son was 16 in your program. Today he's just turned 22. My daughter was 19 and a half. Today she's almost 25. My son is doing really well, happy, healthy, and moving onward in his life. My daughter is kind of stuck. She is quite jealous of my son, and my son is doing well, but she has not flourished as she thought at the age of 25 plus. How to deal with the jealousy at this point in their lives? It's a fair question. Um, you know, this is going to sound maybe somewhat simple, but that's something that she needs to sort out in therapy. right? It's not really yours to fix, yours to be your project. I would just empathize with her over and over again and talk about how hard it must be and try to hear her. If there's a question about it, you can offer to her, if you're willing to, support by saying that you'll support her in going to therapy. But there's a lot of things that happen to us in life, and that there's a famous psychologist who one time said that people portray something he called pseudo stupidity, which means that it looks as if they don't know the answer to something, but really what there is an emotional block there. And I would suggest that her kind of figuring this out, resolving this problem, is much more embedded in whatever her issues are, and probably it's probably a distraction from whatever else she's feeling underneath. It could be an indication of something that she feels absolutely aside from the fact that he's doing better right now. Maybe it goes back years, but the problem with this is, as you hear me kind of contemplate the many possibilities that this could be about, what this means, it's really not anybody's to figure out but hers. So I would empathize, empathize, empathize. Don't try to solve it. You're going to hear this theme tonight, I suspect. Be curious, wonder, and offer support for her to talk to a therapist. But I don't think this is something that can be sorted out by any speech on your part or my part for that matter, but something that she's going to have to do some work on and really dive a little deeper to discover and sort it out, because it's not about her brother, and it's about her, and it's about her relationship with herself. I mean, that's a really important principle. Most of the feelings we realize as we do more and more of this work, most of the feelings that others have towards us and we have towards other is really just about the relationship with self. And the quicker we discover that, the quicker that we start to address what really needs attention, which is our relationship with ourselves. The fact that it gets played out in parent-child, child-parent relationships, spousal relationships, brother-sister, sister-brother relationships, the fact that it gets played out in that context is somewhat irrelevant. It's about relationship with self. So really, this is about her relationship with herself, and at least in my experience, the best way to sort that out, to discover what's going on there, is to go to therapy. And I wouldn't suggest it or demand it or direct it. I would merely offer it as a support if you're willing to do that. But do your best just to listen, 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 and not try to fix it. That would be my thought on it. Why won't my child be ready to come home after a vote? It's a complex question, really. Kind of the pat answer is it took for most of the children that come here, it took them a long time to get here. It's going to take them a long time to heal whatever wound is at the heart of whatever led you to sending them to evoke. So that's the kind of the pat answer. Kind of another layer up from that, but still not with a lot of depth, is that our experiences shows us that after a really intense dynamic intervention like evoke, that clients, students need more time, something transitional, that the drop off to the community with one outpatient therapy session a week is too dramatic for most of our students. That's kind of the next level up. But the last kind of most specific answer to the question is that it's very individualized to your daughter. Right? That's a great question to ask your daughter's therapist or your son's therapist. I will tell you this, and I've said this previously. When I started in this field 23 years ago, when I started doing wilderness therapy in the early spring of 1996, it was my absolute bias that children go home after wilderness. I worked for that. I supported it. I encouraged it. It was only out of experience, it was only from experience that I began to conclude that this intervention is often best served It often best serves the family when there's a follow-up placement, some kind of transitional program, therapeutic boarding school, residential treatment center, sober living, transitional living, something like that. So I want to be clear about that. It's not theory that teaches me this. It's not my own innate predispositions that teach me this. It's my experience after working with dozens of clients, which now has grown to thousands of clients. So having said that, that's where it comes from. There's one last piece of it, and that is sometimes the family's just not ready, right? I think we miss our children. I know for myself, I loved and missed my son when he went to wilderness therapy. He's now 26. At the time, he was 14. I missed him terribly. I wanted him home, both during wilderness and also in his therapeutic school after that. But it's not easy. And so part of it is getting ready yourself. And being ready means coming to the place of realizing it's never done, that it's going to be hard, really hard, that there are going to be things that look like significant regression, but you're equipped both with the tools, but also with the emotional resilience, right? Flexibility, elasticity to be able to deal with that, that it's not an all or nothing, pass or fail kind of situation. So some of it's about getting the family ready, making the family, helping the family get ready and set them up for success. I'll tell all of you this tonight, and I can't say it any more emphatically, which is the best way to get ready for your child to come home is to do your work. Do your work, do your work, do your work. And that it's got to be separated out from, when your child comes home, has to be separated out from just the feeling of loss and affection you have for your child. That absolutely fuels, right? That's the love that fuels us as parents. But it's really important that that doesn't eclipse our ability to see what our son and daughter needs, to see it's not going to be this joyous reunion. It will be for a little while, but it's going to be work. It's just the next level of work. Also getting in place resources for you, resources for your child. Again, I'll be clear about this. I think that I spend more time in my career now, for the most part, week to week, with families than I do with children, with their children, parents than I do with their children. And I don't know that this number is accurate, but kind of the way that I think about it is 1 hour of my time with a set of parents is worth about 5 hours of my time with the child. I believe that. That's my experience. So if you want to get ready, if you want it to move quicker, do your work, do your work, do your work. Do the things that we ask, try them out, get a therapist, come to an intensive, go to an intensive somewhere else, go to Al-Anon Coda. Just do your work so you're much more aware of what are my contributions to this issue? How do my reactions sometimes exacerbate situations or problems or issues? My anxiety, my fear. What's my attachment wound? What does it mean to provide healthy attachment for my child? All of those kinds of questions I think are important. Can our other child visit the field with us? It's a great question. The pat answer, or the typical, excuse me, the default answer is no. It's such a brief period of time, relatively speaking, that we end up spending so much time trying to catch the other child up to speed with what we're doing that it really distracts from what the child in treatment and the parents need to work on together. It really does. So that's the difficulty. And this is not, if you're getting ready, any of you are getting ready for a field visit, for a family visit, look at the webinar on field visits or listen to the podcast on field visits, and understand that it's if you come prepared to work, it usually goes well. It usually ends up being something that you value and that you got something out of it. If you come just for the reunion piece of it, just for the celebration of seeing each other again, you'll usually walk away disappointed. upset. In fact, you'll oftentimes avoid or any uncomfortable situation that comes up will be seen as difficulty or a failure. So that's something I would just make you aware of. Come ready to work, and that's really what these are about. They're not so much about reunion and celebration. Okay. There are exceptions to the sibling coming, but check with your Evoke therapist and see if yours is one of those. I've had some of those exceptions. I've had students come out to the field and stay an extended period of time without the parents. So it's not impossible. It's just not our default answer. What does a typical day look like in the field? Well, I'll tell you, there's two kinds of days. The therapy days are therapy sessions, and the therapist is doing sessions with each of the clients, having group sessions with all of the group. The clients are working on letters, reading and writing therapy assignments. They're getting laundry. They're getting new food supply. It's kind of the weekly spring cleaning, if you will, of their backpacks. So all of that, they're taking showers. They're taking care of all of their physical and therapeutic needs. The other 5 days of the week, they're doing mindfulness activities. They're cooking and working together on providing meals for each other. They're making fires by rubbing sticks together using the Bodil fire technique. They're hiking. They're breaking camp. They're setting up camp. They're having standing groups throughout the day. They might be working on some hard skills, like putting some of the crafts that they work on, the spoons, or making a pouch for themselves, those kinds of things. So the other days are active, doing camping, a combination of camping, hiking, with therapy interspersed throughout. An average day might have 10 standing groups. That is 10 groups where somebody checks in with how they're feeling or maybe some conflict that they're having in the group for a few minutes. We try to have one formal group at least, if not two, every day. One in the morning that's usually a little shorter, and one in the evening that becomes our kind of our North Star, if you will, group for the day, meaning we're processing what's going on in the group throughout the day. We're having them read books throughout the week. So almost every client or student has a book that he or she is working on, and then they'll have personal time. We call it P time every day. And so they're working on that. So 2 therapy days, which also support all of the house cleaning that they need to do for themselves, and then 5 hiking and camping days with therapy spread throughout. I will tell you this. Some of the most important breakthroughs happen during the non-therapist days. The therapists are there to kind of bring back some accountability, like what was talked about last week, to create an updated treatment plan for the following week, themes, assignments for the following week. But really the work that happens that's valuable often happens, like I said, in between therapy. Claude Debussy said that that music wasn't the notes, it was the space in between the notes. And I use that to say I think that's the same with therapy. Therapy isn't the session so much as the space in between the session that really makes it therapy. So so much happens in between and all throughout. It's all grist for the mill. Conflict, cooking, cleaning, chores, all of that becomes grist for the mill. Hiking, dealing with weather, all of it. Do you have any tips about how to deal with my guilt for sending my child away? It's a great question. I would encourage you to look at the webinar or podcast on guilt and shame. I'll start with this. To do the right thing in our lives, we have to learn to do battle with guilt. So first of all, understanding what guilt is. Guilt is not an indication of doing right or wrong. And many people suppose that it is. Guilt is a wiring that comes to us because we were taught by our parents that when we upset them, worried them, disappointed them, frustrated them, that we were doing something wrong. Because that's how most of us were parented. Is our parents told us how they felt, how upset they were, right? And so we imagine that we do that to our children. That's a whole nother webinar broadcasts unto itself. But so our brain grows up wiring that says how other people think and feel if they're upset or hurt, sad, frustrated, that it's a reflection directly on us of what we've done right or wrong. And it's not. Every single person can easily, on this broadcast in attendance tonight or listening on the recording, every person can quickly imagine many examples of things that somebody does that's the right thing to do that causes somebody else to be hurt or upset. I can give thousands, I can give an infinite number of examples where saying something, doing something that is appropriate, healthy, hurts somebody else. But because of our wiring as children, we've come to think that that's some indication, some trigger, alert that we've done something wrong. So do battle with guilt. The broadcast on the dance of anger is a good source to learn about guilt. The podcast that I've done on guilt and shame is a good source. And just start to understand that to be better parents, you're all going to have to learn to tolerate guilt a little bit more. I mean, that's I have to be a better father, to be a better spouse, to be a better friend, to be a better colleague at Evoke. I have to do battle with guilt. Otherwise, I'm trying to be good, and then that leads to inauthenticity, that leads to control, that leads to compromising who I am, on and on and on and on. So that's what I would say is do battle with it, lean into it, learn to tolerate it, understand that it's not an indication of morality or good choices, and weave your way through it. It's a valuable, it's an important question. And then lastly, the tools are the broadcast on guilt and shame, and also the book, The Dance of Anger, and the broadcast on the Dance of Anger. We have a teen at home, this next parent says, that doesn't engage in family therapy. Any suggestions on how we should handle this? So this was actually came to me separately through a therapist, asking about how to help engage a teen. So I thought I'd take a few minutes because I think it relates to anybody. First of all, understand that a teen, if they're not wanting to engage, they're feeling threatened. If they have a wall up, they have a reason for that wall. Therapy is not, it's really not something in the outpatient setting that you can impose on somebody. You know, we get away with it in wilderness and residential treatment because everything becomes therapy, right? Even if a child doesn't engage, that's therapy out in the wilderness, right? If a child shuts down, therapy is happening because it's all encompassing. It's all integrated into all aspects of life and living out there. But for the teen or the client at home, imposing therapy on somebody doesn't work quite as well. That's why, as you know, many of you are at this point that you have a child at Evoke. So I would say first and foremost, don't try to get them to engage. Honor it. Spend some time honoring it. In other words, what that looks like is, okay, you don't want to talk. We're going to work on ourselves. Maybe they're not attending the session. Have the parents attend the session. But if I were thinking, looking at the teenager not engaging through the lens of therapy, what I would look at or what I would hear is, this isn't safe. I don't have any control over this. People are trying to knock down my walls with a crowbar or a pickaxe, and I'm going to build them up even higher. Remember this analogy. If you built a wall around yourself, think of laying bricks around yourself, bricks and mortar around yourself, to protect yourself from perceived threats from the outside world. And let's say you build that wall up to about eye level, and you see somebody coming with a pickaxe and a sledgehammer and a chisel, and they start picking away at your wall. What are you going to do? Right? I've never asked this question where somebody answered it differently than you're going to build the wall bigger or better or run away. So if a child's shutting down is a wall, don't try to pick through it. Try to understand what it's trying to tell you. If I was the therapist, I would try to guess. Try to give that wall a voice. I would work with the parent that says, What about your child's interactions with the family feel unsafe? Let's talk about listening. Let's talk about judgments. Let's talk about erasing people by trying to lecture to them. Let's talk about ignoring somebody's wall, right? Try that for some time. Reframe it. And I'll tell you this. When I run intensives, because we run custom intensives in Park City, Utah, many parents would be as well served or better served by coming to an intensive themselves before or instead of bringing their child, if their child is significantly reluctant. Okay? I'll say that again. Many parents would be better served to come to, instead of bringing the child, to come to an intensive by themselves first, or instead of bringing the child to an intensive. It's really about giving you the tools, the skills to see the child, to hold them, to support them where they need to go. If the child is significantly reluctant, right? Really resistant. Now, I'll also tell you this. Most children have some reluctance, some more than others. And my favorite thing about the family intensives is that at the end of it, the children often feel like, man, this is great. Like, I don't want to leave. I feel safe here. I feel like I was heard and I was given, I found I was given a voice more than I ever had. And the parents walk away saying, wow, this is an entirely different project than it was when I started. And I realized that I have a lot of work to do. So you see that shift? The child, excuse me, the child walks away feeling empowered and validated and heard, and the parent walks away understanding that there's a different project at hand. That doesn't relate directly to this question, but it illustrates the point that we want to honor defenses, not break through them. By honoring, that means listening to them, understanding them, giving them a voice, even if they themselves have a hard time giving it a voice. All right. Happy to take any live questions that have come in tonight. All right. Let's see. Waiting for question one. Question one comes in. How do you know when it is time to send your child? And also, how do you know that sending your child away won't be a traumatic transition? It's a very fair question. Two questions, actually. Nobody can tell you but you. It's you know it when you know it. You know it when you decide it. One of the things that I talk about is your child a part of the solution? Do they have the capacity to be a part of the solution? What's the risk that's at home? How long this been going on? What else have we tried? But I hope this makes sense. It's like if you were asking me the question about when is it time to get divorced? When is enough enough? Very different subject matter, but similar kind of idea. How do I know, if one of my adult children came to me and said, how do I know if I love somebody? How do I know if it's the right time to get married? All of those kinds of questions I can't answer. And be wary of any therapist who tries to answer them. We can give you some guidelines like the one that I just gave you about, is the child a part of the solution? How dire is the risk? What have you tried? Are you done with the experiment of being home? On and on and on. Those are ways to think about it, but those don't answer the questions. Those just ask different questions. So you get to decide. I was thinking about an intervention for my 16-year-old son this summer. And I was thinking about some kind of wilderness experience. And I was going to family therapy, and the family therapist, or my child's therapist, who then served as our family therapist, had lots of advice for me about what I should and shouldn't do. And after a while, I began to think something was off. I was trying to be a good client and not be the therapist, right? I'm trying to be the client in family therapy. But after a while, I just started to feel uncomfortable. And I started to say to myself, that's not how I would talk to a client. That's not the way that therapists ought to talk to a client. He doesn't know. He doesn't know the right thing to do, right? Therapists don't know your truth. That's not their job. Their job is to provide a safe place where you can discover your truth. So I called two of my friends, one in Los Angeles who runs a treatment center, and one in New York who runs a treatment center that are really related to the issues that my 16-year-old son struggles with. And on a specific day, I had back-to-back phone calls with each of them because I just wanted to hear other ideas. Neither one of them told me what to do. Neither one of them recommended anything. I asked questions, they answered, but they both basically reflected back to me and said, it sounds like you know what you need to do. It sounds like you're done with the experiment at home. It sounds like you want to try something outside of the home because you're ready to kind of try something to get unstuck. That's the most directive that they got. And both of them were absolutely right. And so neither one of them gave me advice, but by the end of each hour, and cumulatively after the second hour, I was absolutely clear and grounded about what needed to happen. Talked to my wife, but she'd been doing the same kind of research. We had a discussion that night, and the next day we sat down with my 16-year-old and we said, here's what we're going to do this summer. And we came up with a plan. And he said, what if it doesn't work? And we said, we don't understand the question. It's just something different to try to get you unstuck. And if you're stuck when you get back, then we'll try something else. To the trauma piece, I think it is traumatic in the sense that it's dramatic and it's a big shift. But I'll tell you this story. I had a student years ago who came to me really, really young looking. He was 13, but really, really young, small, fragile. Was so scared. When I saw him, I thought, that boy looks 11 years old. And by the end of his 9 or 10 weeks, he was so strong and empowered. He was so confident. I remember him sitting at his graduation session with his parents, basically telling them, look, you've got to do your work. I'm okay, but that's not your job. Your job isn't to do my work. Your job is to do your work. And those are two different things. I remember him so clearly saying that to his parents. And I just sat back and thought, wow, this is very different from the child I met several weeks ago who was saying to his parents, I can't do this, I can't do this, please help me. I'm crying myself to sleep. So he looked great, he sounded great. They decided to take him home. They had a behavioral contract. One thing after another, the behavioral contract was violated. I kept some contact with him and they decided to send him back. One of their hesitancies to send him back is he said, I was traumatized. He even said, the therapist said he had PTSD from coming the first time. And I said to the parents, gosh, I don't think so. I remember how he looked and sounded his last several weeks of the program, and that's not somebody who was suffering from PTSD. That's somebody who felt safe and confident, maybe for the first time in his life. So I said, I can't promise anything, but I'm skeptical of that. Well, they decided to send him back. I still remember the day that I pulled up to camp, parked my car, walked up the trail to where the group was, and he saw me, and he came running and jumped in my arms to give me a hug. And I sat down with him and I said, it's good to see you. Sorry that it's under these circumstances, but I'm looking forward to working with you and to catching up. He said the same for you. And I said, hey, I'm curious. You told your parents that you were traumatized. Even your therapist suggested that you had some PTSD. And he said, yeah, that's the only thing I could do to punish them. The only thing that I could do to hold them hostage. And I said, that makes sense. And he had a fantastic second stay, went on to a therapeutic boarding school, had success there, has since graduated from school, is doing very well. Many years ago, of course. So it's hard. It for some families is a pretty dramatic departure. In family therapy, we call it a healthy betrayal of kind of the ground rules that were in place before. But, you know, it goes back to like if children hold resentments or upset. I hope this makes sense what I'm about to say because it's important. My son, my older son who went to wilderness therapy, my younger son who went to a wilderness one-on-one program this summer. If they came back to me and said, I'm mad at you, I'm hurt, that was traumatizing, my answer would be, I'm sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry. I was doing the best to help, and I thought it would be helpful, but I didn't know. Of course, neither of my children have resentments towards it at all. Not even a little bit, because it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter to me in the sense that if they did, that would be okay. Because I'm not invested in being right. Right? I don't need to be right. And there's really, it's just my best guess. It's just I'm going to do my best. And even because sometimes I hurt my children on purpose. Sometimes I yell at them. Sometimes I shame them when my patience is thin. Right? I do those kinds of things as a human father all the time. But the relationship is such that they get to think that I'm a piece of crap father sometimes, and they definitely get to think that I hurt them sometimes and that I'm unkind or what have you. So once you get out of the idea that you can get it right and that this is not none of this work that I do is about being right. This work is about being an authentic self. And there's nothing more resilient than an authentic self. And there's nothing more fragile than the need to be right or good. So you do work, you get support, you do the best that you can, and you realize that nobody can tell you when to marry somebody, nobody can tell you when to divorce, nobody can tell you when to engage in an intervention with your child. It's something you have to do. What support is there during the week for the family, and what support is there for the remaining sibling at home? Well, all parents have a parent portal, okay? And in that parent portal, there are a list of assignments, readings, assignments to go to meetings like Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous that we ask all families to go to at least 6. There are writing assignments, book assignments, podcast assignments. Podcasts and webinars are the same thing. So there are those recordings that we ask people to do. So that happens all throughout the week. There's also a parent mentor that parents are assigned when they first come into the program that they can use throughout the program. There are parent meetings that happen throughout the country. There's a parent workshop that happens somewhere in your child's course of stay. There is a parent coordinator at all of our sites that they can answer any daily questions you might have about your child. And then there's the weekly family call with the therapist. So there's all of that stuff that happens. One of the things that we try to provide for life are these recordings for alumni families, live broadcasts, and for anyone, even non-family members, non-alumni of our program. These are turned into podcasts the following day, so that you have this support forever. This source of connection support. For the sibling, it's the same things. They can utilize any of the readings from our library, any of the parent portal assignments. I try to do one of these per month for and about siblings. So siblings can come on and ask questions if they want, or parents can ask questions for siblings or about siblings. And then these are recorded, you see, on the podcast. In fact, I was just looking today on our most listened to podcast. We have about 250,000 listens in the last 2 years. And the second most listened to podcast is the one on siblings. So those are some of the resources that we have. Have you benchmarked the success rate of Evoke or these types of wilderness therapy programs against traditional recovery programs and clients exiting the program and performing well or not in their journey toward recovery? Again, I can speak anecdotally. I'd have to brush up on the research, but we have a robust research page that you're welcome to go to, which is using measures that are normed against other populations, other similar populations in treatment. So I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we stack up well against similar type of programs. So go to our research page, our How It Works page, our evidence page. Knowing that every client is unique and where they are in their recovery, what are your thoughts, recommendations on an effective step-down program and thoughts on putting them back in an environment like a high school that they came from? You know, I really, really wish there were more mentoring programs for people returning home, no matter how long they're gone. I really wish there were more wraparound type of programs after children get home. I think a lot of high school, maybe even young adult children, for that matter, benefit as much or more from mentors as they do from therapists. Some love therapy, but I think mentors can be as important. There are mentoring programs out there that can be helpful. I think going back to the same high school presents a challenge. I don't think that in and of itself is the make or break for most children. But it's another challenge to stack on top of them because old peers, old peer group dynamics, old roles that they played in those peer groups can just add to the challenge. In a perfect world, they could start fresh at a different high school. And by the way, for the most part, this isn't entirely true, but it's one marker. The more your child is open to something like that, going to another high school, at least considering it, at least seeing the wisdom in it, the more ready they are to go back to their own high school, right? People that surrender, people that realize they have issues, people that have accepted that they need help and support to make and maintain change are much more open. People that are more defended, don't see the problem, are in more denial, are much more rigid about what they demand and need. So it's not a perfect science, but I know what surrender sounds like. It sounds like I don't know, or this is my preference, but I'm open to hearing. Or yeah, I can see the wisdom in that. That would be hard to go back. That's what surrender sounds like. Surrender meaning opening yourself up to the process. Denial sounds more like, no, I have to go back. I can handle it. There should be no problem. I'm ready. I'm committed. So it's not the make or break, but it's more weight on top of the shoulders of the child returning home. I think mentoring, wrapping around programs are great. There are a lot of programs you can ask your consultant or referring professional about mentors in your area or parent coaches that come with mentors. I, I think that we would have more success in general if there were more services like those at home in all communities. Intensive outpatient programs where the child and the family is going 2 or 3 times a week at night as a step down can be a really good transition. And all of these should know what wilderness therapy is and what has been accomplished there. So they're not starting from scratch, reinventing the wheel. I think that's going to be the trend going forward is more of those types of programs and shorter term interventions and the decade to come. My 12-year-old daughter is wondering about sending letters to her brother. I like letters from siblings a lot. Check with your Evoke therapist to make sure, but I really, really, really think that especially younger siblings have the sweetest voice sometimes for their brother or sister to hear out in the field. Right? They just have access to their hearts, and so I almost always want siblings to write their siblings in the wilderness. Check with your wilderness therapist, but in most cases, we think that is an important, tender, valuable connection to maintain and to foster. It's part of what ties your family together in good ways. So I support it. Okay, I have an 8-year-old asking me, is my sister safe and will she be happy when she comes home? She's safe. She's safer in wilderness than she is at home. That's almost always true. So I want you to know that first is that she's safe. And we have lots of staff members and lots of people watching out for her to make sure that she's safe all the time. I want to tell you that. And when we do studies, when we look at how safe we keep, how safe the kids are in a program like ours compared to being at home, what that shows us is that kids are safer here. They need fewer doctor visits. They get in less trouble out in our program than they do at home. So First of all, she's safe and we're looking out for her. Second of all, will she be happy? I think she'll be, the goal is not that she's just happy, but that she's more able to feel all of her feelings, right? We kind of think like the goal of life is not just to be happy, but to learn to be sad and to learn to be angry and to learn to be happy and joyous and to feel everything and to learn to feel all of those things without getting in trouble. Because sometimes when we're sad or hurt or lonely or embarrassed, sometimes we do things so that we don't feel those things, and that's where we get into real trouble. So I hope that she'll feel everything and that she'll be more able to feel all of her feelings without getting in trouble, without doing things that hurt her or get into fights with your parents or things like that. So thank you, Ruby, for asking the question, and I'm glad that you joined us tonight. And if you want a t-shirt, Ruby, if you're attending, you can email us, have your parents email us at webinar@evoketherapy.com, and I'll be happy to send you a t-shirt. And then you can take a picture of it and send it to your sister. Next question, how do the counselors in the wilderness get a student to participate in therapy? Is there a negative reinforcement if the teenager keeps not participating in the program that is offered to them? I'm a parent of a male student who has been there for almost a month. It's a good question and a difficult one to answer because we do everything we can. We first and foremost try to be patient and try to let kind of the natural consequences of not working kind of sink in with the child. Sometimes we use positive peer pressure and encouragement, modeling from the other peers to try to get them to engage. Sometimes we try to understand what's the function of the symptom of not participating. Sometimes it's to punish you. Sometimes it's to wear out your patience. Sometimes it's because they're afraid of feeling something or failing. So it really depends upon why they're not participating. We try to discover what that is. I would be especially curious and interested if I was your child's therapist or if I was you to look at the possibility that he might be trying to do this to punish you or engage you in a power struggle or hold you hostage. And if that is true, if we believe that that's a part of it, then I would coach you to say things like, it's okay if you don't work. We're going to do our work here regardless. And we'll wait this out, and at a certain point, we'll decide on the next setting for you, whatever that will be. And I'm not saying you write that exact letter, but you just let go. I've actually had some extreme cases, and I'm only talking about 5 or 6 out of 1,000, where I've had parents write the entire group because the child wouldn't read a letter or write a letter. So I've had parents write the group. Sometimes the parents write a 1-sentence letter. If the child isn't writing back, sometimes the parents don't write anything. But important to find out what in your child's behavior might be a power struggle and try to remove your participation in that power struggle. And then explore what other reasons for their resistance and try to support, bypass, encourage the getting unstuck, but also seeing if we can find a voice and speak to the need that's being unconsciously or non-verbally communicated. But yes, resistance is not abnormal for us at all. And it's a complex art of getting people to do some work, getting children to do work here. What measures do you have if my son decides to walk out of the program? How do you assure his safety? If we stand still and refuse to give it, to bring him home, do you check with him? We don't check with him, not necessarily, no. We allow him to, we drop, what we, the kind of, the general idea is we drop him off at the homeless shelter in town. But it's a risk. The streets could be unsafe for him or for her. So we can't tell you what to do. We can encourage you and tell you what we've seen work, but that's a call that only a parent can make because the child could get hurt. Now, on the other side of that, It could hurt your child even more or more long term if you capitulate and support them in coming home. But you get to decide that. See, it's actually against our ethical codes as therapists to give advice in important life situations like this. So we'll coach if you're on board. We'll support if you're on board, but there's no guarantee. And that's a discussion that I have with every parent who is considering holding the line that if you walk out, you're on your own. I'm not going to support you, and you have to live with the consequences as a mother and a father. And there's no way that I can substitute in and take responsibility for that because I'm a father. And at the end of the day, I get to decide. I have to decide. I have to bear that responsibility. But we can talk about ideas, what's worked, what are the dynamics at play here, and that if you decide you want to hold a boundary, we can coach you about how to do that and how to say that. Next question. Our son is in his second week at Evoke. He was diagnosed with special needs from a very young age. Are there specific populations of kids who have not improved significantly as a result of wilderness therapy or who have not experienced lasting positive change? Psychotic students have not seen, we don't treat psychotic students because of that. Um, what else? If their IQ is so low that they can't internalize any insight or any skills, that's a rule out. So if the IQ is too low, learning differences and even autism spectrum disorders are well treated in wilderness, but really low IQ sometimes is prohibitive in terms of our outcomes. And so again, we often won't accept them into the program. Other than that, it's a pretty amazing intervention, and we separate them by diagnosis and profile so that the addicts aren't with the Asperger's kids, and you treat them according to their own treatment plan. And let me underscore this. The kind of work that you do with us, this is something that I'm maybe most proud of at our program. If you do this work, listen to 20 or 30 podcasts or webinars while your child is with us, read my book, work on your parent portal, go to an Al-Anon meeting, go to the parent workshop. If you do this and develop this new sensibility that we're talking about, you'll be different. And you'll have different eyes and different ears. That doesn't guarantee that your child changes, but it by far is the most powerful contribution you can make toward your child's short-term and long-term change. So if a child seems particularly resistant, maybe because of anger, frustration, or power struggle, for example, I'll encourage a parent to entirely shift their focus inward. And when parents do that, it has a remarkable impact on the child. But mostly thought disorders, psychotic features, and low IQ are the things that are diagnostically or intellectually rule outs for us. My 13-year-old is currently in his or her fifth week at Cascades. What are some of the things that maybe his 12-year-old sister can watch or do to help him when he gets home? Our counseling doesn't start until after our son is home because they are so booked out. You know what I would encourage you to do is to read The Knight and Rusty Armor together as a family. Or 12 years old, they could probably read it by themselves. That's a really great book. Any of these podcasts that are for siblings, you can have them listen to. Anything that they can do, writing letters, have the 12-year-old ask the 13-year-old what he or she thinks that he can do. So start that process. But the Knight and Rusty Armor is a really good start to understand kind of metaphorically what we do here. And it's good for young people. There's some other books. Touching Spirit Bear is another book that is a good one. So some of the books that we recommend that are youth readers would be good ways for the 12-year-old at home to start gearing themselves up. The basic webinar on communication skills would be helpful. So at least you don't have to master it, but there's some common understanding about the skills that are being taught here. Those are some starts for sure. How does the other family members support the child, emails, letters, etc. This is the aunt asking questions. It's a great question. I would ask the family that and ask the therapist. And the fact that you're on this, by the way, if you're on this live broadcast, like I said, all of our broadcasts, and just to give you some perspective, we've done over 1,000 of these broadcasts. We have about 230 of them on the podcast app. So peruse through there. The best thing that you can be doing as a family member is understanding what your brother or sister and their children are going through. Just ask questions. I'll tell you a cool story that I've told a few times before. I had a sister, an adult sister, who was visiting her adult brother for the first time in a sober living environment after our program. He'd completed our program and he was at a sober living home somewhere in New York City, actually. And so they were going to visit, and the sister contacted me. The parents gave her my number, and I said she could call me, and she said, I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I don't know what to say, and I don't want to mess up. So can you coach me so that I won't say the wrong thing when I visit my brother? And I said, why don't you start off with that when you visit him? Why don't you start off saying you're nervous about saying the wrong thing? Because you see, he's been the problem child, right? He's been the screw up. He's been the one who has issues. And how wonderful would it be if his sister, who's been the hero child, the good one, successful and not struggling, how wonderful would it be if she came not knowing? How amazing would that be for her to show up asking questions instead of getting it right? Then he wouldn't feel so alone. And it would be nice because for the first time, perhaps in your relationship, he would know some things that you don't know. And I think that would be amazing. So, in addition to familiarizing yourself with what we're talking about, because this stuff applies to every relationship, doesn't matter if you have a child in treatment or not. The stuff that I talk about, I talk about it in the context of having a child with mental health and addiction issues, but it's not about that. It's about being a human being and being in relationships. So the more vulnerable you're willing to be to kind of lean into not knowing and asking questions and learning and getting curious, just don't have experts and don't have the answers for your family and don't tell them the way that it is. Just show up curiously. Show up with a beginner's mind, humble, asking questions, willing to learn. That's the greatest gift. And then ask questions of each person, including the child in the wilderness. Is there anything I can do to support you? Don't come with the answer. Come with the question, the not knowing question. What if the remaining sibling at home is thriving and happier with the other child away at Evoke? What if the sibling has zero desire to engage with the wilderness client? Makes us very sad. I think it makes a lot of sense. I would honor that also. It's some relief. It's natural. It's not. It doesn't take away the sadness, but for me, when I say honor it, because I've used that phrase a lot tonight, I mean respect it and understand it, or at least be curious about it. Right? When we have a need that differs from that of our child, we have a couple of decisions to make. One is, do we impose our need on them? In other words, our need to have our son or daughter engage with the wilderness sibling. That's our need. So we can make that choice. And in some cases, we're going to make that decision because our need is so fundamental to our values that we're going to do that. But we can also ask ourselves the questions, maybe I can take care of my needs somewhere else. I can grieve somewhere else so that I can support my child at home with what they need. By the way, when we honor it, when we respect it, when we get curious about it, oftentimes it goes in the direction we want it to anyway. But when we try to push or impose our need, not seeing the child, not responding to what they need, it oftentimes stays stuck and locked. So that's the way I would think about that, is to, grieve somewhere else. Don't bring that to the child. and try to understand, deeply understand, as best you can, the place that he or she is at in not wanting to engage the wilderness client, because it might be a very, very healthy striving for them to keep that distance. I see a lot of homework on the portal, which are mandatory and which are suggested. How important is it for us to have our own therapist if we feel like we have enough support? None of them are mandatory. It's a smorgasbord. It's a buffet that you get to choose from. You know, I'm a fan of therapy. I've learned things in therapy that I don't know any other way. I couldn't have learned any other way. But that's my truth. Um, so therapy, support groups, writing assignments, reading assignments, group attendance, workshop attendance, that's all voluntary. I would encourage you to try some things outside of your comfort zone. See what feels good to you. Try a couple things more than once, but nothing by any means is mandatory. All right, last question. This is a lot of questions, and then I'm going to have to wrap up the hour. Do you help kids in the extreme case of borderline personality disorder symptoms that seem to be developing and aren't really treatable in therapy or medication? Having a child with genetic predisposition, which limits them significantly with standard medication, do you have a team that looks further into this? Absolutely. In fact, one of my specialties is dealing with personality disorders, specifically borderline personality disorders. And I'll give you this last nugget as I wrap up tonight. And whatever questions are left over, we can take, and I'll do another Q&A session. I won't wait a month to do it. I'll do it in a couple of weeks. If there are more questions, I don't know if there are any more. But an important thing I learned about borderline personality disorder is you cannot win with them. You get to choose how to lose. The game is set up for you to lose. That's the goal of the dynamic of the engagement. And when you learn to lose, when you learn to get good at losing, you start to engage the personality disorder in a way that works a little bit better. But you've got to get good at losing. And you've got to choose how to lose. So that's a little nugget. We have a podcast on personality disorders that you can look at or listen to if you want to. All right. Upcoming events, and this all of you can stay on for this. Upcoming events. Let's see. I'm gonna have to go backwards. Sorry. We have pursuits programs for any family or adult adventure therapy trips all over the world. So think sober, fun, or therapy light. Sober, fun, or therapy light. We would like all current parents to go to a parent workshop. The next one is February 16th and 17th. See if your therapist thinks that's a good time for you also to visit your child. Think 2-day, multi-family, multi-parent, experiential, educational, networking kind of thing. Parent support groups, we have one next week in New York. All of you are welcome. You can bring a friend if you like. Monday, February 11th, 7 to 9 p.m. Or in Southern California, I'll be there noon to 3 p.m. on Sunday, February 24th. And then in the Bay Area, we'll be there the 28th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Contact Melanie at evoketherapy.com for more information. If you want to do a deep dive, you don't have to have your child at Evoke. This is something I do every year for myself, something I believe in strongly. All of my children, my older children have gone to this. My wife has gone to this. Finding You. The February one, I think, is full, but there's some openings in March. If you want to do a deep dive into your work, come to a Finding You workshop in beautiful Park City, Utah for a 4.5-day experience that is absolutely healing and revitalizing. My book is available on Amazon right now. The warehouse, I think, is restocking, so you might have to get it from Evoke Therapy Programs down here where the arrow shows under the new options. It's called The Journey of the Heroic Parent. It's also available on Kindle and audio versions. Follow all of these broadcasts on the podcast app on your iPhone or iOS device. Go to the podcast app and search and subscribe to Evoke Therapy Programs. On an Android device, download the SoundCloud app and search and subscribe to Evoke Therapy Programs there. Or on a computer, you can go to soundcloud.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @EvokeTherapy. On Facebook, find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs. Find the Alumni Foundation that helps people that can't afford therapy by searching Evoke Family Foundation on Facebook. And then our blog is a great source of content. We ask all current families to try 6 of these support groups. Any combination of Al-Anon, CODA, Families Anonymous, Alateen for teens, or adult children for adult children of alcoholics. If you have a family that you found to be toxic or unhealthy, you can go to that. You can also go to a Refuge Recovery Meeting, which is a Buddhist-inspired recovery program, or the National Alliance on Mental Illness has NAMI chapters, NAMI.org, chapters all over the United States if you need other help. All right, folks, I'll address any questions if there are any left over. I will reschedule a Q&A session as soon as next week and try this again. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for your support. I hope this is a nice point of contact for you. And for those that you are new, please subscribe to our podcast channel, peruse and look through and see what interests you there, and any of the other resources that we have that I mentioned tonight. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you Wednesday night, where I'll be talking about the identified patient. That'll be this Wednesday, February 6th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Take care, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.